Thank you so much for joining the Dr. Whisperer podcast show. I am your host, Sharon Feckety, and you are here to listen to others talk about the business of medicine. Don't forget to subscribe, share it with somebody else that is in the business of medicine so we can all learn together. Thank you for being here and enjoy the show. You are legit. We're recording right now with
Perfect.
Me starting by saying you are legit. Like, you're too legit to quit. Now I'm aging myself again. Do you even know that reference?
Oh, no. I do. I wore hammer pants to the 7th grade dance. I knew like the move, the like one leg like dance. Oh yeah, for sure. In fact, my eighth grade basketball team at Westview Middle School in Pflugerville, Texas, we that was like what we would come into the gym with, was too legit to quit. So I am all about that. Yeah.
That has made my heart so happy this morning talking to you.
Yes, I try. I aim to please. We could go down the
we could talk about 80s, MC Hammer. Yeah,
yeah,
we could.
Exactly.
Well, interestingly enough, yeah, let's start that way. Let's just be totally the way we are as human beings. And we'll talk about the business of medicine eventually or not. But I was walking through the park this morning and I got to see 2 dolphins, a rabbit, a tortoise, an eagle.
Oh my.
And I thought I would have to really love what I do in order to stop this walk. That's a great walk. Thank you. But I do love what I get to do because I get to have conversations like this. Now, what I didn't mention is that while I was walking, I was listening to Kevin Hart interview another comedian, which I love. I think comedians and musicians and physicians are some of the most interesting people in the world. Hence why I've stayed in this industry for 20 plus years, because I could throw out an MC Hammer reference. You could jump in, and now the conversation is actually super interesting, not so boring. Not like, you're like a board certified anesthesiologist. You're like too legit to quit. But you also have all of this wonderful, I'm sure this wonderful life that has led you down that path. So we're going to get there.
Sure.
But the reason the music reference was so interesting was because the guy, who of course I can't remember his name right now, maybe I'll tell you later. It was a comedian that does a podcast now about music, and I'm going to tell you what it's called because I'm going to subscribe. It's called One Song Podcast.
Okay.
And this Harvard educated comedian interviewing this TikTok influencer. They fell in love in the pandemic. They just he was like, listen, I think you're great. You know so much about music. Let's do a podcast. And now they have a podcast. And now I listen to that. Now I'm going to subscribe. And you might too, since you know who MC Hammer is.
What's the premise? They're following artists that were popular for an instance of time, or had like a one single hit that was like super popular, or what's the gig?
So it's what's so great. It's so this beautiful Black man who's this comedian, who I'm going to tell you the name now because this wouldn't be fair not to show love, because all Black comedians listen to this show. That was a joke, Josh. I hope they do. Wouldn't that be amazing if they were like, the Dr. Whisperer? That sounds funny.
Yeah, exactly.
Funny, not funny. But I will tell you that Kevin Hart's podcast is called Gold Mines, and he was interviewing Diallo Riddle today.
Okay.
And you will definitely have to listen to their podcast.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Because these two have broken down music from we're talking David Bowie to MC Hammer, and certain parts of the music tell the story, and it's just fascinating.
Oh, no, I would love to. I'd love to.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, I feel so good now. I told you that.
No, there's I saw there's even a bit on like a Daft Punk song that they just one line from One More Time that they slow down and speed up and slow down, and that's the whole riff for the whole song. Anyways, so I would, and that is the like iconic bass line for this Daft Punk song that's super popular. So I would absolutely love to do this. Yeah.
And that is exactly what they're doing. And I couldn't wait. And of course I'm walking, I got bald eagles, dolphins, and I'm like, my brain is going to blow up.
You were in the moment.
I was in the moment, but I was like, I got to stop and I got to interview this board certified anesthesiologist. How am I going to top what has already happened? And you have topped that by knowing about that MC Hammer. And now I understand why you're friends with Suede.
Yep. So Zwade and
I keep saying his name wrong.
No, that's all right. That's okay.
No, it's not all right, because he already gave me shit for it. So
Zwade, I were separated by a few years, but we went to the same residency program, and kind of followed similar trajectories, and through very fortuitous, happenings, both were thinking about kind of through different ways, physicians and the challenges for physicians in really like getting personal loans, access to capital. My pathway to being interested in it was different than Zwade's, but we both were thinking about the same problem. He was much farther along in the process of figuring out a solution. But long and short, I was like, oh my God, I've been thinking about this for like the last 3 years. And it was truly on my end, it was related to, in my day job, I manage a lot of anesthesia practices. I practice clinically, but I also have administrative responsibility with some practices. And I was always kind of surprised sometimes with if something happened and there was any issue with payroll, and like a check was going to come out on Friday, and something happened with payroll, and we couldn't make it. Something happened. There was enough cash to make the payment, but something happened and payroll was going to get the check to that individual on Monday. I was always really surprised. I would get a call back that was like, no, I need the cash today. And I always thought, oh, that's crazy. Like that, you're making a lot of money. But it is our responsibility to pay you on time, but wow, 2 days. And so I kind of got interested just in that of like, what causes that, but also is there an avenue to help individuals like that if there is a period where they need a push. And then, like I said, I met Zwade. He was already working on the similar problem, and kind of one thing led to another, and I was able to kind of join his team as a strategic advisor with Doc2Doc.
I mean, so all right, I believe in serendipity in business.
Yeah.
So Zwade, which finally I've said correctly.
There you go. It's
Thank
perfect.
you for repeating it over and over again. Can I blame the fact that I was once a drug addict? I did write a book about it. So I usually don't even have this out, but it seems appropriate now. So if this is being,
that's great.
Recovering for 28 years now.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. But I blame a lot of that. I used to blame being a drug addict. Now I can add COVID to it. I could be like, yeah, long term. I have all these reasons why I can't say it, but I want to honor him. He's a cool dude.
Yeah, he's great.
How did you actually meet? Like, where was that kismet happening?
Yeah, so I met Zwade's partner in crime, Kenton Allen, another anesthesiologist, actually at one of our annual anesthesiology meetings in Boston. I guess it may have been 2018. And Kenton and I just sort of hit it up over a beer and talked about this. And Kenton was like, well, Zwade and I are working on solving this with Doc2Doc. And so Kenton connected me and Zwade via phone. And we both had a lot of mutual colleagues at our residency program. And I would describe both of us as kind of fairly charismatic. And so immediately it wasn't one of those things where people were like, Josh, I don't remember Josh. Oh my God, Josh Lumbley. Yes, of course we remember Josh. Or Zwade Marshall. Yes, absolutely. I remember Zwade Marshall. And so then we just kind of we hit it off, and he was kind enough to let me join the team.
Awesome. I love it because it makes sense. I'm like, because I've had the great pleasure of having conversations with Zwade and laugh with him. And I thought, well, okay, so who's Josh? Like, and is he fun? So we started, before we even hit record, like just laughing and our brains blowing up, talking about CrossFit and background walls.
There you go. Yeah.
Those are my kind of conversations, let's just let this flow.
Absolutely.
And one of the reasons that I've loved Doc2Doc Lending is because being in the medical industry as, a director of operations at one point in New York, and working with, we had orthopedics, neurologists, neurosurgeons, internal med, and then we had acupuncturists, so it was like this Eastern, Western, wonderful multi-purpose type of facility. And there were so many docs, and like you just said, one of the doctors came running through my mind, like, if he wasn't paid,
I know.
Like, it was almost like he would have like a breakdown. And here he was, like this board certified, like amazing physician. And he was driving I think he had duct tape on his windows, and this is in New York. Like, you don't want to have duct tape when it's snowing. It's bad.
Definitely not.
Now, I know that's extreme, but I have seen too much of that. And when I find a company like Doc2Doc, I'm like, yeah, that's just a beautiful way to help a physician, because when you are not, and I am not, but I have had the great, beautiful grace of being surrounded for 20 plus years of all different kinds of specialists. There's this very there's no business taught in med school. And I think that's starting to change slowly. I've been trying to help doctors for as long as I can remember. And I've always loved their path to doing what they do. And then there's this tremendous amount of, dare I say, ignorance sometimes when you are not inside of the industry and you think, well, you're an anesthesiologist. You probably have 4 homes in Aspen, and, everything has just been kind of laid out. Nobody really knows about like all of the loans and the how much money has to be paid back and how little the reimbursement can be within the insurance model.
Yeah, you're right. And then there's everything in between,
yes.
Which, everything, from obviously there's the nexus that everybody has, which is well, not everybody, but the vast majority of us have, which significant student loan debt. But you're thinking about your early 30s is when you sort of get this opportunity to become an adult, and so everything is like crazy accelerated. It's well, now is the time to start a family. Now I can finally afford a house. I still have these loans hanging out there, and I'm trying to build my practice. Maybe I'm joining a practice, and then there's sort of the mid-career issues that folks have, which is like if they're building their practice, they have to pay their own malpractice. If they leave a practice, they have to pay their tail for their malpractice.
Oh my God, I haven't heard tail in so long. And tail is not what you think, everybody.
And the thing is,
we're not chasing tail here. Well, maybe.
Exactly. Well, that can get you in trouble. That could be another reason you need to take a loan. Yes. But the reality is all of these things happen and they require liquidity, which frankly, folks may be high earners, but they're not technically wealthy, right? Because you put everything on hold until you're 30. Now you're starting when you're 30 and you still have a lot of debt that you're paying. Yes, maybe income is high, but you're certainly not wealthy. And then if anything happens along that road related to work or related to your personal life, that requires a substantial outlay of cash, let's say just even more than $10,000, like people don't have that just sitting around. And so it is difficult. And having that kind of liquidity as a young physician is just, it doesn't happen.
It doesn't. And I guess that's, one of many reasons why I've really taken such a love for Doc2Doc Lending and all these other great resources that come together built on, I was thinking about that. Like you said, I've had this idea and oh my goodness, there's somebody else that's already started the process. And then, that serendipity jumps in and before you know it, there's this wonderful company built. But let me hear a little bit about you.
Sure.
I mean, we're giving a lot
of love. I'd love to. I'd love to. Yeah.
Like, all right, enough about Zwade. Come on.
Yeah, Zwade. But
exactly.
Yes, there you go. There you go. It's long COVID rearing its ugly head.
Thank you for that. Oh man, he's gonna give me shit for this. I can't wait though. Actually, we went down a nice little rabbit hole too when we were talking. I'm pretty sure I said we were talking about getting laid. Somehow that came in. It wasn't about like him and I, but it just kind of weaved its way. And I thought after like, I'm just going to let that live.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah. It's not very common when you're thinking about the business of medicine. Let's talk about you. Where are you from, Josh?
Yeah, I grew up in Austin and lived there through high school. Went to Tulane for college, ran track and cross country there. And then, it was fun. It was really hard to be pre-med and to be an athlete. And then I went to Baylor in Texas for medical school, matched at Harvard for residency. And so I was in,
oh my God.
So was in Boston.
A real underachiever here.
And so I was there for 4 years, did a health policy fellowship in DC. So I was able to work with a member of Congress for a year doing health policy. And then my first job out was in Columbus, Ohio at Ohio State. So I stayed, and my wife and I, we love the Midwest. And so it's the brunt of a lot of jokes. People are like, do you have buildings taller than like 3 stories? And like, it is great. It's great. I freaking love living in the Midwest. And so so that's where I've been since then. I stayed at Ohio State, got my MBA. And then transitioned to my current job as practicing clinical anesthesiologist, and I'm also chief quality officer of a large anesthesia group practice. So my job is really to oversee about 3,000 anesthesiologists and nurse anesthetists. They range in age everywhere from kind of late 20s up until say early 60s, and they have families to take care of, and oftentimes they're the primary breadwinner in the family, and so it's my job to help them deliver an anesthetic that's safe for the patient, that the patient is comfortable, and that doesn't have complications. And a lot of tough decisions, but I love doing it, and it's a great job. And I have this project here with Zwade, where I'm a strategic advisor for Doc2Doc.
So I was thinking while you were talking about those 3,000 people, how lucky they were to have such a nice human being helping them. I think that's it's really, in the business of medicine, it can be very tough at who is at the top or leading or advising. And it's such anesthesiology, like, wow, what an incredibly big job that is. What a unique specialty. And to be able to, even just hearing nurse anesthetist, my best friend's daughter was trying, and just couldn't do it, couldn't pass the test, and she's a successful RN in Manhattan today. But,
Yep.
It's a very difficult specialty, and how nice that they have, you, a nice person. Not to say that there's not a lot of nice,
Yeah, no. I truly, I am definitely, I love the team that I work with, and I fully support them. What they do day in and day out, in terms of caring for very complex patients, is incredible. And I love getting to help them do it.
Yeah. I mean, because I have worked with anesthesiologists that have left that practice and now do like weight management and bioidentical hormones, like that's a thing. And people take this one in particular that I'm thinking of was working with a few spine surgeons and really just had a very rough go of the people that she was working with, and then just decided to go out on her own, and it's been very successful.
Good for her. That's great. I mean, that is great.
Every doctor listening or watching knows that your traditional insurance only goes so far. Your malpractice only goes so far. So there's real risks that can actually keep you up at night. You know that. I know that. I've watched you stressed out the next day from all of these insurance issues. Well, SRA 831B admin helps you mitigate these risks and lower your tax liability by putting money into a vehicle that is tax advantage to self-insure risks that fall out of your traditional property and casualty insurance. I would not have them as a sponsor if I did not believe 100% that they can actually help you. So to find out more information, please check out the website that is in the show notes. Contact them today. I promise you won't regret it. This podcast is sponsored by Doc2Doc, the personal lending platform designed for doctors by doctors. Doc2Doc believes that traditional lenders overestimate the risk of lending money to doctors, focusing too much on challenges of their financial past and giving them insufficient credit for the promise of their financial future. Yeah, we love what Doc2Doc is doing within our community. That is for sure. And we encourage you to visit their website at Doc2DocLending.com. Learn more about them today.
I think that is, I think that is also one of the things that I think is so admirable about Zwade and the journey that he took, and it's truly like one of the things that people are really drawn to with him is just this idea of like, okay, I have a thought in my brain. It would be great if there were a solution to this problem that I'm facing today, which is, I have people who can't go 3 days without getting a paycheck, or, I don't know how I'm going to make my first and last month's rent in Boston. Whatever it is that you have this idea and it just sort of germinates there. And then you figure out the whole process to kind of jump off the cliff and start a company with it, knowing that there is a not insignificant risk of failure, and then you do it. And that's it is kind of atypical, frankly, in medicine. That I'm not necessarily saying it's like coached out of us, but it's a very stable job.
Yes. And stable is the word, the trending word in medicine.
Exactly. It's a very stable job. Maybe there is kind of a ceiling of achievement in terms of, so if you have a desire for leadership or growing your career, there might not be that pathway. It's sort of, there is in a non-healthcare corporate setting. Having said that, the safety of a really good salary for your entire career is a nice one. But I do think there's always something in the back of people's minds are like, God, what would it be like to start your own business? And to see that come to fruition and hopefully be successful. And it's just, there's a very, very small subsegment of folks that I think that do that, that pursue that, and ultimately are successful with it. And that is, I mean, that I think is one of the like really cool things about Zwade is following, like, okay, so walk me through this. How did you do this? Like, what were the steps that you had to go through? And really sort of, where was there friction? Where was the point at which you were like, this is not going to work. This is not going to work, And then, I've heard people, this analogy of like, we are jumping off the cliff and we're building the airplane while we're falling. And there is some truth to that. And I just think like that part of like hearing him describe that and I mean, kind of going through it with him in some parts, it's cool as hell. It's pretty exciting. And I think it's one of the things that, a lot of folks like to hear, just because they may not be comfortable in doing it, but it's always, I think they're always with a lot of physicians and advanced practice nurses and folks in the healthcare industry is just like, gosh, what would it be like to start my own business?
Oof. Well, and so for 10 years that I've been on my own consulting as the Doctor Whisperer and now really just dedicated to the show and speaking at conferences because I'd rather help more people than just the one-on-ones that I have through the years. It has been, I've helped. That is literally it. That's why it speaks to me so much with Doc2Doc because I help physicians break out. I always do this if you're watching with the handcuffs of corporate.
Yeah.
And there's so much fear because the stability is so good. It's like the stability was so good for me as director of operations for New York Medical, as a practice manager for a very large practice here in Tampa Bay. It was stability.
Yeah.
Like nobody could understand why in the hell I would want to leave that. But when there is a calling and when there is almost you have no other choice, but like, I have to do this. Like there is something that is gnawing at me. Sure. I gotta try it because the last thing we want to do, I think if anything, through the pandemic that we've learned is like, we've all heard about how you don't want to die with any regrets, but
no,
that was a very serious through that. Right.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. And I think, in my day job, you try to capture that a little bit and say, is there something we can do? Like, so before we were recording, we were talking about this show on Apple TV called Severance, which makes like work just seem terrible, absolutely terrible. It's this like dystopian view of just mindless stuff. And so much of what we do in healthcare is not that, but it is exciting. It is inherently, you're having meaningful impacts on patients at their moments of where they are most vulnerable. Having said that, the guild goes off the lily pretty quick, and folks do sometimes start to view it as like a supply chain, cog in the wheel type mentality. So it is easy to get very disenchanted with providing healthcare. And so I also do think that it's incumbent upon employers to say, gosh, before that person gets to the point where I'm like, I have to leave. I have to go do something else because this is not satisfying me personally or professionally anymore. Like, what can we do as an employer? Like, as I alluded to, there is there's a ceiling of growth. Well, how do we get rid of that? Are there things that we can be doing that beyond just healthcare that we can say, you can keep being, you do an amazing job of taking care of patients. On the other hand, what do we need to do to keep you engaged, to offer professional development, to give you some career pathing so that there is the boredom of the stability of the job. You get the good part of the stability, but we do get professional development as well. Because, on my end, I sort of say like, gosh, we have a lot of people leaving healthcare now. We have a lot of people choosing partial FTEs, and it's challenging to even provide the necessary care that we need to. What do we need to do as employers, as colleagues, to kind of stem the tide of people leaving the healthcare industry? I'm all supportive of folks finding their passions and leaving, but I also do think it's like employers, like the old way of doing business, of like, I'm hiring you as a physician, I'm hiring you as a nurse, I want you to do the same thing over and over again for the next 40 years. Sound good? Great. Okay. That's just not going to work anymore.
Wow. I mean, yes. Josh, I'm going to have to ask you to come on my other podcast show eventually called The Broken Road to Mental Health in Life and in Business. And it is the absolute reason that I wrote that book in 2019, because I was witnessing it. If I'm going in and I'm getting hired by a practice to come in and restructure the business, I would go in, I would ask 5 questions to the employees. This is it. This has been since I worked at New York Medical in my 20s.
Yep.
I would say, okay, how long have you been at the job? What do you love about your job? What do you hate about your job? How do you like to be rewarded? I would have to slow that one down because I'm from New York. And when I would say that in Florida, they didn't know what I said. I'd be rewarded. And then what are you doing to contribute to the growth of the practice? 5 questions. Every single practice that I went to in the 10 years that I was consulting. Now, of course, those questions I had asked at New York Medical and the practice that I managed, ultimately, always they would cry when I asked that one question.
Man.
About how do you like to be rewarded? Just that one. So, when you are hearing people that you have just met for the first time that have worked in a practice for 10 years, 15 years, 4 years, that are crying to a stranger, which is what I was, I knew there was a bigger problem.
Absolutely.
The disconnect of what the team is saying versus what the doctors that were hiring me for, I was like, there is a way bigger problem here. And it always goes back to what you were talking about, that professional development. When I would meet with a physician, a consulting gig, whatever it was, I would just always ask them, so what are you reading? What am I reading? Yeah. Like, what are you reading? Like, what do you like to do? Are you listening to any podcasts? Are you watching? Now are you watching Severance?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing to encourage that excitement?
Exactly. Yep.
Because you listed 19 amazing schools that you went to do the job that you're doing today, cross country, and you're in CrossFit, and you're, all of these things. All of that, I am quite sure, is what keeps you fulfilled and watching Severance, which I'll be watching. But I think that conversation is paramount, and employers, if they don't understand that today, whether you're a doctor, CEO with your MBA working in hospital administration, if that's not the thing that you're thinking about in 2023, then
honestly, it has to be. It is like kind of a little bit of almost I am maybe being a little hyperbolic, but it is almost like an existential crisis for healthcare right now.
Yes.
I mean, it has to, of course, like the North Star is providing great patient care that's safe and continues to drive the needle towards continuous improvement. But the reality is, if you don't have people on your team that are able to deliver that care, you're hosed. And so your capacity to fulfill that one mission is wholly and completely based on the people that you've got on your team. And if you don't have them engaged, even if you have them engaged, it's tight. It is tight right now. Yes. But if with it being tight and disengaged employees, you're in a really rough spot for the next few years.
Really rough.
Potentially many years, I think.
And you're right. It is a crisis. I just did a keynote in Boca Raton, and the title of my keynote is, "Does mental health live in your workplace?" And this was not for doctors. Although they were all helping senior living facilities, right? Which is very near and dear. Like you gotta be on your game if you're dealing with people that have dementia and Alzheimer's, and you have to have a happy staff around you. And the week before I was about to deliver that keynote, they asked if I could take the words mental health out of my title. I know he's frowning right now. If you're just listening, because they didn't want the focus to be so hard on mental health. They were afraid what people were going to think.
Wow.
And that's, wow is the reaction. Because now I did not change. I did not take mental health out of my title. I closed the laptop and for 3.5 hours went back and forth with them. It'll be part of my next keynote, what happened, because it is the only thing that is going to change even medicine, right? I had a physician recently and I went on TikTok about it. He diagnosed me with hyperirritability. Josh, would you think that I'm hyperirritable?
I know. Never would have crossed my mind. Absolutely not.
Could you imagine going to a doctor and disagreeing with a doctor and then getting diagnosed with hyperirritability?
I mean, that's some ego right there. That is some ego right there.
Well, and in this world, without naming who it was or whatever practice it was, I just went on TikTok and I told the story. And then I saw hundreds and hundreds of people commenting on these things. And now I know, without them knowing that I know, that the reason was because of his unhappiness at working in this corporate place and how frustrated he was that he only had 15 minutes. I knew he had to get out of the room because I do this for a living, but I disagree with what you're telling me. It's a very serious problem, Josh. And I'm glad you're part of the solution.
No, well, so, I mean, I think, so here's an example. So, there is always going to be like friction at work, using the, anesthesiologist sort of analogy here, or nurse anesthetist analogy. There is inevitably going to be like 10 p.m. case that's booked by a surgeon that could wait till the next day. But the reality is, in anesthesiology, you're kind of in the service industry of medicine. It sort of is like you kind of a little bit like you respond to the needs of the surgeon or the proceduralist. And in that moment, you're frustrated, but you just do the case. And I always think like on a numerical scale, that may kick you up from like 10 is the worst. 0 is like, oh my God, I'm on vacation and in the Maldives. This is amazing. And so you may be at like a 4 or a 5, but then that case is going to kick you up to a 7. And it's like when you hit 8, 9, that's when you say like, enough. I'm done. I'm turning in my resignation tomorrow and I'm going to a no-call position, or I'm going to drop to a half an FTE. I can't do this anymore. But, you bring stuff to the hospital. So you start your day not at 0. You start your day with everything that's going on at home. Do you have financial challenges? How am I going to pay my tail policy? I am going through a divorce and I have to bring this amount to the table to as part of the as we split the resources equitably. And you're not coming to work, and then of course there's everything, the tumult around COVID. We're not coming to work at a number of 2 anymore. We're now coming to work at the number 4. We're like already pretty close to burnout just showing up to the hospital. And then those little things at 10 p.m. no longer kick you up to a 7. They kick you up to a 9 or a 10. And that's when you say like, I'm done. I'm out. And so, I think that is one area, and financial challenges are one of those things that you bring to work with you. And so if there is a way that as a company, we can alleviate some of that friction and the challenges just associated with the finances in your life, and, the way shit got sideways during COVID, is there a way that we can, help an individual, a fellow physician, get through that rough patch? We're all about doing that. And so, A, it helps you as an individual, but B, like, we'd love for you to be able to stay in the game. And if that brings you down from a 4 to a 2, that's great. Because, the last thing we want is like that hanging over your head while you're taking care of patients, while you're finishing your residency, while you're making a transition into a new practice, et cetera.
Yes. Like all of that and so much more. And I think it would be so beautiful if we had more emotional intelligence surrounding leadership that could really understand that doc in the hallway that's screaming at the nurse, it's not because she didn't circle the right code on the encounter form or whatever the case is, that it's so much deeper than that. So if we don't improve our communication and our opportunities for listening, which is actually not waiting for our turn to talk, which was exactly what happened in even this case of this hyperirritability that I mentioned before. If you're not listening to me, you can't hear me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
exactly
such a big skill, and a big skill. And there's so much time constraint that is left on these physicians, surgeons, anesthesiologists, the list goes on. That scenario about 10 p.m. and like, oh my God, like, and there's such there's like this, it was the person that scheduled it, then the manager that didn't overlook the schedule, that didn't realize that this doc has an appointment at 6 a.m., whatever. There's so much that goes into it.
Yep.
But we need to improve our people skills.
Totally agree.
That basic, right? Basic. We need to have better conversations. So I'm going to ask for, another conversation. Maybe I can convince all of the docs to come on over to the Broken Road to Mental Health in Life and in Business, because I purposely called it in business, because this is where we need the change the most.
Agreed.
We need at work. Work.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. This was fun. It was a good time.
Wasn't it though? Like,
I will never be described as a person who does not like to chit chat, and so you make it easy. And so
I love to chit chat.
Yeah, it's good.
Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much.
My pleasure.
Everybody, check out Doc2Doc. It's in the commercial, so click on the links and all the good stuff.
Yeah.
Don't forget to mitigate risk. Visit 831b.com for more information. Remember to check out Doc2Doc, the personal lending platform designed for doctors by doctors.